All right, today we're looking at Ephesians chapter 6, verse 13, and what it takes to stand. Before we get to verse 13, let's take a quick look at Ephesians 6, 10 through 12, and this is from the ESV to set us up for 13. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. So that brings us to verse 13, and here we read in verse 13 ESV, Therefore take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. So we're going to do something a little different today. We're going to take that verse and we're just going to dissect it piece by piece. And let's dig right in. So the first thing that we see is Diatuto. And in the ESV they translate that as therefore. But it's literally, dia with the accusative is literally either is on account of or on this account in this case, because tuto is this. Right? So on this account or on account of this. Well, what is this? The this is the conditions described in verses 11 and 12. The schemes of the devil, the wrestling against flesh, not against flesh and blood, but against rulers and authorities, right? That's the stuff. Then we get to the next part where he says, Analabate. Analabate is an imperative, and it's a second aorist imperative, and it comes from ana, up, and lambano, take or receive. So as an imperative, take up. So on account of this, take up, take something up. Let's take a look at what we're to take up. Tain panoplion to theou. So you've all heard the word panoply, and panoply in the ancient world was the array of armor and weaponry allocated to a soldier. So we're told, in light of what's coming, in light of these struggles, take something up. Take up what? Take up tain panoplion. Take up the panoply to theou that is provided by God. So a subjective genitive of source or of origin. Where does this armor come from? It comes from God. Whose armor is it? It's God's armor provided to his soldiers. So on this account, take up the full array of armor available to you from God. That's pretty magnificent stuff. All the military equipment that God makes available, you should take up on account of the trials and struggles and wrestling and the schemes of the devil that you will face. Let's look at the next part. Hina dunathete Antistanai. So here, as soon as we see the hina clause, we know that we're getting into the subjunctive mood. In order that, or so that, dunathetai, you should be able, or you might be able, antistanai, to resist, to stand against. Anti is against, obviously, and stanai comes from histemi, I stand. So in this infinitive, antistanai, to stand against, to resist. So why should you take this up? Take up the full armor that God makes available in light of what's coming? In order that you might be able to stand, or so that you should be able to stand in resistance. Anti-stanai, to stand against. Hold on to that thought, because that particular piece with the infinitive is going to come back at the end of the verse. In order that you may be able doesn't only apply to this infinitive, antistanai, but it's going to apply to another infinitive right at the end. Let's carry on. Ente hemera te ponera. So in order that you may be able to resist or to stand against in the evil day, ente hemera, in the day, what kind of day? Te ponera. Ponera is in simple apposition to hemera, so it's modifying the day with evil, telling us what kind of day is it? It's an evil day. What day are we talking about? Is it a specific day? Is it a 24-hour period? Or is it the time in which you will face the schemes of the devil, where you're struggling not against flesh and blood, but against powers and authorities in cosmic places, etc., etc.? Right? We know it's obviously the latter. Will that happen on a specific day? Perhaps. But what we're being counseled to do is to prepare for a time that is coming. And how do you prepare? By taking up this full armor, the Panoply to Theo, the armor that God makes available to you. Why? In order that you may be able to resist in that evil day, in the evil day. So now we get to my favorite part of this thing, and here we go. Kaihapanta, katergasamanoi, stenai. And after conquering, successfully working against everything. So hapanta is everything, and katergasamanoi is a participle for that comes from kata, against, and ergadzomai, I work. So after working against all the stuff that's coming your way, the schemes of the devil, the struggling and wrestling with powers, principalities and so forth in verses 11 and 12. After you've worked against all of that, you'll be left with that other infinitive that I mentioned earlier, stenai, to stand. So, and after conquering or successfully working against everything, you will still be able to stand. Let's go back to that earlier part so that you may be able to resist Antistanai, right? So it's the standing in opposition. Now, also having worked against all that stuff, having done the hard part, been through the battle, not Antistanai, but just stenai. So what does the armor allow you to do? It's in order that you may be able to stand against all that stuff in the evil day, and having worked against all of it and prevailed, to stand. Antistanai, stenai. Hina dunathete, in order that you are able to stand against, and when all is said and done, to still be standing, to still stand. Magnificent, powerful stuff. How do we know that he's saying that you're going to prevail? Because when we see that participle without a negative, we're to presume that you have successfully worked against all these things. If there were a negative, if it were negated, then we would know that you failed in the work of resisting. So think about what he's saying here. The standing against and resisting the evil day that was characterized is embodied in the working against all things, and when all is said and done and you stand victorious, you still are able to stand. Why? Because you took his advice, you took up the tain panoplion, the full armor, to Theu, that God made available, and by putting it on, because earlier in verse 11, he says, it may be verse 10, in verse 10 or 11, he says, and put on the full armor of God. But here, of course, he says, before you can put it on, you have to take it up, right? So having taken it up, having put it on, you are enabled, you are given the power to resist these things that we're told were coming. And after fighting through all of them, when all is said and done, there you stand. Magnificent stuff. I love the imagery of the warrior left standing at the end of the battle, equipped with this full array, tain panoplion, all the armor, all the equipment, not just cobbled together stuff, but the fully dressed for battle warrior equipped by God to stand in the fight. He goes on to describe that in verses 14 through 18. You probably want to read 14 through 20 in chapter 6, where he addresses each of the elements that form the panoplion to Theu, the full armor of God. This guy, Paul, Pretty impressive stuff. Through inspiration or through what they would say in the greater Boston area, he was wicked smart. And he really fleshes this thing out beautifully. There's hard times coming, and on account of this, Diatuto, you should take up, Analabate, take up this full armor, the tain Panoplion to Theou, in order that you should be able to do two things. One, Antistanai, to resist, and then after going through the full fight of the resistance, kata ergasamanoi, having worked against it all, having worked down these challenges, you'll still be able, because of that armor, to stand. Magnificent, magnificent. Hope that was good for you. If it was, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And until next time, Charis Kai Reine, humane grace and peace to you.